miles, like we wanted to get past Charlotte before and away from the big cities before people really began to understand that we were in a major crisis, that the grid was down and we were going to be in trouble. We were in a major crisis. Now, if I didn't have all these dreams that come to pass like they have, that I wouldn't be talking about this. But again, it's something that you just have to take it and pray about it. We want to travel far enough, fast enough to be able to get past Charlotte, North Carolina, to get to our home that's like 30, 40 miles up the road past Charlotte. And that's what we're doing. That's what we're thinking. So we're thinking about the danger of being in a situation like that and being anywhere near a big city to survive this thing. So, if you're listening to this podcast and you haven't prepared, the scripture says in Proverbs, it says that the wise man sees trouble coming and prepares for it. And be like the ant. The ant works in the summer and builds his nest up, throughout the summer. Proverbs is a good place to study. And I know a lot of Christians get this idea like, well, God will protect us and God will take care of us and, God will cover and He will protect us. He will take care of us. But we also have to be awake. We also need not to be asleep. We have to be awake and we have to be living a life of wisdom, and if you haven't noticed the world we're in right now and the environment that we're in right now, the political environment we're in, and all that's escaped you and you have no clue that we're moving towards something that is big, that means you have been asleep. And so what I would do, I wouldn't panic or nothing, but I would do like the dream that I had with Asia, a city in Asia, which was I was being corrected in that dream for being a person in Asia during some kind of crisis where I had to shelter in and not having any food, just living one day at a time, just not even thinking about the next day, just going down to the vendors that were in the street and getting my food for the day and going to the cafes and then coming home. And I didn't even have, in this dream, I didn't even have any food in the refrigerator. I opened up the refrigerator, there's just water and, like half a lemon or some crazy thing like that, just like nothing in there, because I was living on day-to-day vendors providing, food in the marketplace, in the street in front of my flat downtown, and going to the cafe, just living that kind of life, and come home and nothing's in the cupboards. I mean, nothing. But in that dream, I'm looking through all my cupboards and I'm getting this correction, like, what are you doing? What are you thinking? Why would you have all these cupboards like this that could store food and you have nothing in there? What if you got stuck in your apartment and you couldn't leave? I mean, literally, that was what the dream was like that. And when I went outside, at first when I went outside, there was vendors all over the place. I mean, the city was just teeming with all kinds of, with people and food and the marketplace and cafes and all that. And then the next day I go out and there's nothing. It's a ghost town. No one, all the vendors are gone. It's just a ghost town. Absolutely nothing out there. So when I went back to my flat, there was no food. And in that, in that dream, the Lord, it was like somebody's commentary, like somebody speaking, saying, you know, now you have to go find food because you don't have food. You didn't have any foresight. You didn't plan anything. Now you have to go and put yourself in harm's way just to get something to eat, something to drink that you should have in your home already. And so that was before the pandemic. And it was in an Asian city in this dream. And I don't know what Asian city it was, but that's exactly what happened when the pandemic hit. And people had to stay in place, you know, shelter in place, and was it put in dire circumstances because of that. So that came to pass. I'm just saying, pray about this thing, about lights going out. I had another dream besides sheltering in place that obviously referred to the pandemic. And that was probably about 6 months before the pandemic. And that dream was really freaky because all of a sudden I'm just standing in an emergency room. And again, we had no idea. Nobody was thinking about anything called coronavirus. This was about 6 months before it all hit in January of 2020. But I'm standing in a emergency room, and this particular emergency room, the hospital near our place where we lived, was all windows. I'm standing there looking out the windows, and the sun's pretty well set. It's getting kind of dark, and this ambulance comes towards the doors. And I look around. I was the only person really in that emergency room, and then I start noticing this small army of caregivers, of health personnel, hospital people coming out of the doors from the hospital into the emergency room with their full protective gear on, their masks, their head coverings, the clothes, their feet covered, just like an army just came in and filled up the emergency room. They were all standing there like watching this ambulance back up. And I'm thinking, I'm like a mouse in the corner thinking, well, what's going on here, you know? So I'm looking past them. They're all in front of me. And the ambulance gets pretty close to the door. And then the driver and the passenger get out. The minute they open their doors of that ambulance in the front, they take off running as fast as they can. And the medical personnel inside the emergency room are just standing there waiting for that person. They don't even go out there. They're waiting for that person to bring themselves out of the ambulance. Nobody wants to touch him. Nobody wants to get close to him. And so as they're coming out, I can hear them breathing like this heavy, congested, almost to the point of growling, like their lungs were filled up with fluid. And it was sort of a gurgle, growl, heavy breathing, like suffering thing going on. And then that was the end of the dream. And that was about 6 months before Corona hit. So after that pandemic started really setting in, then I reflected on that dream and went, wow, this is just like that dream. So I'm saying all that to say the next two things that I'm concerned about is the tossing wallet dream. We're going into a new monetary system. Now, 4 years later, it really is looking like it's going to become a reality. And then the lights out. The lights out is the one that's very concerning. Very concerning. So, in Ken Peters' dream that he had, that he apparently had in the 80s that he just recently, I think in the 2000s, began to share. He talked about the lights out thing. He experienced that in his dream. And he said it went on for 2 weeks. It happened for 2 weeks. Well, that 2-week period of time, everything just went completely chaotic. He also had in his dream that the beginning of that, the beginning stages of this lights out situation, that sometime either after the 2-week period or sometime after, in that time frame, there was a rapture, and he didn't know what that was at the time. He was just seeing people busting out, some people busting out of their graves and going up into the heavens. And then he learned later that that depicted the rapture, So I thought that was an interesting point. He has an interesting a dream to hear. So there is one other dream that I had that again has to do with a mall, and in this mall there was some. I was walking through the mall with a family member. There's kind of a personal aspect to this dream. I think it might be kind of a milepost for me to be aware of some personal family things that were going on that would give me sort of a heads up as to the timing of when this thing is going to happen that's in this dream. So I'll tell you what it is. So again, I'm in a mall. I'm walking down this mall, and there's an event that, like I said, is taking place that I'm trying to fix the problem there and working on the problem there. And then I walk down. I know this mall, and this mall is out in the west, northwest. And there's a part of the mall that is the west side of the mall. And I walk clear down, and I'm over on the east side, by the way. I mean, I'm literally living over on the east side now. I used to live in the west, now I'm living on the east. And I used to go to this mall that's out there in the northwest. I'm walking down this mall towards the west, and I'm going to go check on something. But I go to where the theater used to be, and it's on the extreme west side of the building. So that theater it was northwest of the mall. And I went all the way down to where that theater was on that side of the mall, and I opened up the door. And that door opened up to the outside. It used to be a theater where that door was. You could go walk into a theater, but it just was outside. And it was a parking lot, and it was a tore-up parking lot. And the Chinese Communist Party was out there, and I swear it looked also like even Russians were out there too. They were just tearing up that parking lot just right outside of that mall. So again, here we have the same scenario with a Chinese presence outside of a mall. For me, in my dreams, a mall always represents, a mall that's in America always represents the economy, the marketplace, the American marketplace. And I've had dreams about malls that were like in other countries, and they represented their, economy. And so, but again, American economy, the Communist Party, Chinese Communist Party, man, are just tearing things up outside in our parking lot, But they're not, again, they haven't penetrated the American economy. They haven't busted in. They're not coming in, pushing themselves around, or being like taking control or having any kind of authority or anything, but they're just really tearing things up on the outside, or monitoring heavily, or whatever, just breathing down our necks. So, and that was that that dream as well.